The Galactic Council chamber was filled with representatives from 43 different species. They had come from every corner of the 7 systems to discuss the same problem they had been discussing for 300 years. Vakroth. The name alone was enough to make even the bravest warriors feel fear in their hearts. On the main screen, footage played from the latest attack. A mining station near the 4th planet of the Kelon system had been destroyed just 2 weeks ago. The station had housed 5,000 workers from 6 different species. None of them survived. The footage showed a massive shape moving through space, black scales gleaming with purple light. It moved like a snake through water, graceful and terrifying. The station's weapons had fired everything they had, but nothing touched the creature. Then, with one sweep of its claws, the station was torn apart like paper. "This cannot continue," said Ambassador Reth, a tall insectoid being from the Therian homeworld. His voice clicked and buzzed as he spoke. "Vakroth has destroyed 17 ships this year alone. 4 planets have been evacuated. The outer colonies are abandoned. How much longer must we run from this monster?" "We have tried everything," replied Council Leader Vorn, an elderly Korthari with gray skin and wise eyes. "Weapons do not harm it. Our strongest missiles bounce off its scales. Energy weapons are absorbed. Even our most powerful dreadnoughts cannot damage it." "What about the temporal trap?" asked another representative. "The one the Velen Science Division designed?" A Velen scientist stood up, her blue skin pale with exhaustion. "We deployed it 3 months ago near the outer rim. Vakroth flew through it without even slowing down. The temporal field had no effect whatsoever." "Have we tried communication?" someone else asked. "Perhaps we can negotiate with it?" "We have sent messages in every known language and frequency," Vorn said tiredly. "Vakroth does not respond. It does not negotiate. It simply destroys and moves on." The chamber fell into gloomy silence. For 300 years, they had tried to stop this creature. Nothing worked. Vakroth was like a force of nature, unstoppable and merciless. Some species had lost entire colony worlds to its rage. Others had abandoned whole systems rather than risk an encounter. "Where is it now?" Reth asked. "Last spotted near the border of the 6th and 7th systems," Vorn replied. "Moving toward unclaimed space." Far away from the Galactic Council chamber, on a small blue and green planet on the edge of explored space, humanity was celebrating. Earth had finally achieved faster than light travel. It had taken 200 years of research and development, but they had done it. The first human ship capable of crossing the stars was ready to launch. The ship was called the Meridian. It was not large compared to the massive vessels other species used, but humans were proud of it anyway. The Meridian could carry 12 crew members and had enough supplies for a 6-month journey. Its mission was simple: explore the nearby star systems, make peaceful contact with any species they found, and return home with data about what was out there. Captain Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of the Meridian, looking out at Earth through the main window. She was 40 years old and had spent her entire career preparing for this moment. Her crew was small but skilled. Each person had been chosen carefully for their expertise and their ability to stay calm under pressure. "All systems are ready, Captain," said Pete Harris, her first officer. He was older than Lisa, with gray hair and a military background. He had served in the Earth Defense Force for 20 years before joining the space program. "Thank you, Pete." Lisa turned to look at her crew. "This is it, everyone. We are about to become the first humans to leave our solar system. Whatever we find out there, we face it together. Let's make Earth proud." The crew cheered quietly. They were excited but also nervous. No one knew what was waiting for them in the stars. The Galactic Council had made contact with Earth 5 years ago, sending a simple message of greeting. Since then, there had been limited communication. The Council had seemed friendly but distant, like they were not sure what to make of this new species. In the lower section of the ship, In a room filled with plants and growing lights, Jake Morrison was making final checks on the life support systems. At 23, Jake was the youngest member of the crew. He had graduated top of his class in environmental biology and had been personally selected by Captain Hayes for his skills in maintaining closed ecosystem loops. Jake loved his work. Taking care of the plants that cleaned the air and helped feed the crew felt important. Each plant was like a small piece of earth traveling with them into the unknown. He touched the leaves of a tomato plant gently, smiling at how healthy it looked. "Hey, Jake, you ready for this?" Amy Chen poked her head into the greenhouse. She was the communications specialist and had become Jake's closest friend during training. "Ready as I'll ever be," Jake replied. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," Amy admitted with a laugh, "but also excited. We are going to see things no human has ever seen before." "Yeah," Jake said, looking at the plants around him. "I just hope whatever we find out there is friendly." The Meridian launched from Earth orbit with minimal ceremony. The news channels covered it extensively, but the crew barely noticed. They were too busy with system checks and course corrections. The ship jumped to faster than light speed, and Earth disappeared behind them. For the first 2 weeks, the journey was smooth. They mapped 3 empty star systems, collected data on various phenomena, and sent regular reports back to Earth. The crew settled into a comfortable routine. Jake tended his plants. Amy monitored communication channels, listening for any signals from other civilizations. Pete ran combat drills just in case. Captain Hayes kept everything running smoothly. Then, on the 15th day, they received a distress signal. "Captain, I'm picking up an emergency broadcast," Amy said, her fingers flying over her console. "It's in a language I don't recognize, but the universal translator is working on it." "What's it saying?" Lisa asked, moving to stand behind Amy's station. "It's a ship in distress, Krellin, according to the signature. They are under attack and requesting immediate assistance." Pete looked at the captain. "Krellin ships are big. What could attack something that size?" "I don't know," Lisa said slowly. "But we are the only ship in range. Plot a course to their location." "Captain," Pete said quietly, "we should be careful. We don't know what we are walking into." "I know, but we cannot ignore a distress call. That's not who we are." Lisa sat down in her captain's chair. "Take us there. Half speed. Battle stations, everyone. Let's hope we are just being paranoid." The Meridian turned toward the source of the distress signal and began accelerating. None of the crew knew that they were about to encounter something that had terrified the galaxy for 3 centuries. They did not know that their lives were about to change forever. And they certainly did not know that their youngest crew member was about to become the most important human in the galaxy. In the greenhouse, Jake finished his work and strapped himself into his station. He felt uneasy, though he could not explain why. Something about this mission felt different. He looked out his small window at the stars rushing past and wondered what they were flying toward. The Meridian moved through space at half speed. Captain Lisa Hayes sat in her chair on the bridge, watching the coordinates grow closer on the navigation screen. The distress signal was getting stronger, which meant they were almost there. 2 minutes to destination, Pete Harris announced. His voice was steady, but his hands gripped the edge of his console tightly. Lisa pressed the button for ship-wide communication. "All crew, we are approaching the distress signal location. Stay at your stations and be ready for anything." In the greenhouse section, Jake finished strapping himself into his safety harness. The plants around him swayed slightly as the ship changed course. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the nervous feeling in his stomach. This was his first real mission, and already they were responding to an emergency. "Coming out of faster than light speed now," Pete said. The ship slowed down, and suddenly the stars stopped moving past the windows. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then Amy gasped at her station. "Captain, sensors are picking up debris. A lot of debris." Lisa stood up and walked to the main viewing window. What she saw made her blood run cold. Floating in space ahead of them were the remains of a ship, but it was not just damaged. It was destroyed. Huge pieces of metal twisted and torn, still sparking with electricity. The ship must have been enormous when it was whole, maybe 10 times bigger than the Meridian. "That was the Krellin vessel," Amy said quietly. "Or what's left of it." "Any life signs?" Lisa asked, though she already knew the answer. Pete checked his scanner and shook his head. "Nothing. Whatever happened here, it happened fast." Jake could see the debris field through his small window. The metal pieces were spinning slowly in the darkness. Some of them had marks on them, deep gouges that looked almost like scratches. Very big scratches. "Captain, those marks on the hull," Pete said slowly. "They look like claw marks." Before anyone could respond, every alarm on the bridge started screaming at once. "Contact!" Amy shouted. "Something huge is approaching fast." "Where?" Lisa demanded. "Everywhere. It's all around us on sensors. Captain, it's 2 miles long." Pete's face went white. "It's Vakroth. It has to be Vakroth." Lisa felt her heart drop into her stomach. She had heard the stories during her briefings with the Galactic Council representatives. The dragon that could not be killed. The terror that had destroyed fleets and planets. And now it was here. "All weapons online. Shields to maximum. Everyone hold on." Lisa grabbed her chair as the ship lurched sideways. Through the main window they saw it. At first it looked like a shadow moving between the pieces of debris, but then it came closer, and they could see it clearly. Vakroth was massive beyond anything Jake had ever imagined. The dragon's body was covered in black scales that glowed with purple light from underneath. 4 legs with claws the size of buildings, wings that spread so far they seemed to touch the edges of space, and the head. The head was long and filled with teeth, each one sharp enough to cut through steel. But worst of all were the eyes. They burned with an angry red light, like stars about to explode. "Fire everything!" Lisa ordered. The Meridian's weapons launched. Missiles streaked toward Vakroth, and laser beams cut through space. They hit the dragon's scales and exploded in bright flashes. Jake felt the ship shake from the force of their own weapons. But when the light cleared, Vakroth was still there. The creature had not even slowed down. Not a single scale looked damaged. Vakroth opened its mouth. There was no sound in space. But Jake felt something anyway. A vibration that went through the ship's walls and into his bones. It felt like pure rage mixed with something else. Something that might have been pain. The dragon reached out with one massive claw and grabbed the side of the Meridian. The metal screamed as it bent and tore. Jake heard people shouting through the communication system. Alarms were going off everywhere. The lights flickered. "Hull breach in sections 4, 5, 6, and 7, someone yelled. "We're losing air pressure." Jake looked at his monitor. Section 7 was the next room over from where he sat. He could hear the air rushing through the walls, making a high whistling sound. His emergency suit began to activate automatically, thin material spreading over his body and covering his face with a clear helmet. He had trained for this. But training was different from reality. Then the wall in front of him disappeared. 1 second it was there, solid and safe. The next second it was gone, ripped away by Vakroth's claw like it was made of paper. The air exploded out of the room, taking everything with it. Plants flew past Jake's head. Equipment tore loose from the walls. He tried to hold on to his chair, but the straps broke and he flew backward, out through the hole and into space. "Jake!" He heard Amy screaming his name through his helmet radio, but her voice was already getting quieter. Jake tumbled through the void, spinning helplessly. Earth was so far away. His family would never know what happened to him. He tried to reach for his suit's thruster controls, but his hands were shaking too badly. He could not focus. He could not think. All he could do was spin through the darkness and watch the Meridian get smaller and smaller. Through his tumbling vision, he saw Vakroth still attacking the ship. The dragon was tearing away huge sections of the hull and throwing them aside. His friends were in there, people he had trained with, lived with, laughed with, and there was nothing he could do. Then Vakroth stopped. The dragon's massive head turned away from the ship. Those burning eyes looked out into space, searching for something. And then, they found it. They found Jake. Jake felt his entire body freeze as those eyes locked onto him. Even from this distance, he could feel the weight of that stare. Vakroth let go of the meridian and began moving toward him. The dragon's body flowed through space like a giant serpent, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "No," Jake whispered. "Please, no." But Vakroth kept coming, closer and closer until Jake could see every scale, every scar, every mark on that ancient body. He could see the damage this creature had taken over however many years it had been alive. Deep cuts that had healed badly, broken horns, cracked scales. This was not an invincible monster. This was something that had been hurt many times. The dragon's head was right in front of him now, so close that Jake could see his own tiny reflection in those huge eyes. He waited for the teeth to close around him. He waited for the end. But Vakroth did not attack. The dragon just stared at him with those burning eyes. And as Jake looked closer, forcing himself to really see despite his terror, he noticed something impossible. There was liquid gathering at the corner of Vakroth's eye. A glowing drop that broke free and floated away into space. The dragon was crying. Jake floated in space, staring at the tear that drifted away from Vakroth's eye. The glowing drop moved slowly through the darkness, spinning as it went. Jake's mind struggled to understand what he was seeing. This creature had just destroyed a massive ship. It had nearly killed him and his entire crew. And now, it was crying. The dragon's eyes were fixed on Jake's face. Up this close, Jake could see that the burning red color was not just anger. There was something deeper underneath, something that looked like sadness so old and deep that it had turned into rage. Vakroth's whole body was trembling slightly, making the purple light between its scales flicker. Jake's fear was still there, making his heart beat so fast he thought it might burst. But something else was growing inside him, too. He had spent his whole life studying living things, learning how they worked and what they needed. Plants needed sunlight and water. Animals needed food and shelter. And this creature, this ancient being floating in front of him, needed something it had not had in a very long time. "You're in pain," Jake said softly. His voice sounded strange in his helmet, small and human. "Something hurt you really badly." Vakroth's eyes widened just a little when Jake spoke. The dragon moved its head closer, and Jake could now see every detail of its face. The scales were not smooth and perfect like he had thought from far away. They were cracked and broken in many places. Some scales were missing completely, showing dark skin underneath. Long scars ran across the dragon's snout and around its eyes. One of its horns had been snapped off halfway, leaving a jagged stump. This was not the invincible terror from the stories. This was a creature that had been fighting and hurting for a very long time. Fighting against what? Jake did not know. Maybe against the whole universe, maybe against itself. Without thinking, Jake reached out his hand. It was a stupid thing to do. Vakroth could kill him with one bite, one scratch, one movement. But Jake was not thinking about that anymore. He was thinking about all the hurt animals he had helped back on Earth. The bird with the broken wing, the dog that had been abandoned, the cat that was scared of everyone. They had all needed the same thing: gentleness, patience, someone to show them that not everything in the world wanted to hurt them. His gloved hand touched Vakroth's snout. The scales were warm, almost hot, like touching a stove that had been turned off but was still radiating heat. Jake felt a vibration through his suit, deep and rhythmic. It reminded him of the sound whales made, too low for human ears to hear properly. But he could feel it in his chest, in his bones. It was a sound of loneliness and longing. Vakroth went completely still. The dragon's eyes closed for a moment, then opened again slowly. The burning light in them had softened. Jake could see intelligence there and awareness. This was not a mindless beast. There was someone looking back at him through those eyes, someone who had been suffering alone for too long. On the Meridian, the crew stood frozen at their stations. The external cameras showed everything. Jake, tiny in his white suit, with his hand on the nose of the most feared creature in the galaxy. "Is this really happening?" Amy whispered. She had tears running down her face. "Is Jake actually touching it?" "The sensors show Vakroth is completely calm," Pete said, his voice shaking. "Its energy readings are dropping. It's not attacking." Captain Lisa Hayes leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of her command chair so hard her knuckles were white. "Why? Why would it stop for him?" No one had an answer. They could only watch. In space, Jake was making a decision. He looked into Vakroth's eyes and saw the pain there, centuries of it, maybe more. He thought about what it must be like to be alone in the vast emptiness of space with no one to talk to, no one to touch, no one who cared if you lived or died. Just endless darkness and endless pain. "I'm sorry," Jake said, and he meant it with his whole heart. "I'm so sorry you've been alone." He used his suit's small thrusters to pull himself closer to the dragon. Vakroth watched him come but did not move away. When Jake was close enough, he wrapped his arms around Vakroth's snout. His arms could not reach even halfway around, but he held on as tight as he could. The vibration got stronger. Jake felt it run through his entire body. Vakroth was making that deep sound again, but louder now. The dragon's whole body was shaking, like it was trying to hold something back, something huge and powerful that wanted to come out. Jake pressed his body against the warm scales and felt Vakroth's breathing, slow and unsteady. Then, acting on pure instinct, on compassion that came from somewhere deep inside him, Jake pressed his helmet forward. He kissed the dragon's scales right between those sad eyes. It was awkward and clumsy, but it was real. A gesture of love for this suffering being. The reaction was instant and overwhelming. Light exploded from Vakroth's body. The purple glow became so bright that Jake had to squeeze his eyes shut. He felt the dragon's muscles go rigid, every part of its massive body tensing at once. The vibration became so strong that Jake's teeth rattled. For a second he thought he had made a terrible mistake. But then the sound changed. It became higher, almost musical. It sounded like relief, like someone who had been holding their breath underwater for too long and finally broke the surface, like someone who had been lost in the dark and finally saw light. Vakroth's body relaxed. All the tension drained away, and the dragon went limp. Jake opened his eyes and found himself looking into Vakroth's face again. The eyes were still glowing, but the rage was gone. The pain was still there, probably would always be there, but now there was something else too. Peace. Gratitude. Hope. "There you go," Jake whispered. "It's okay. You're going to be okay." Vakroth's eyes slowly closed. The dragon's breathing became slow and deep and steady. It was falling asleep right there in space, with Jake still holding on to its face. After who knows how many years of fighting and destroying and running from pain, Vakroth was finally resting. Jake felt something wrap around him gently. Vakroth's tail had curled around his body, not squeezing, just holding, protecting, making sure Jake would not float away. On the Meridian, the sensors were going crazy. Amy stared at her screen with wide eyes. "Captain, Vakroth's energy signature is changing. All the hostile readings are gone. It's like a completely different creature." "How is this possible?" Pete asked. "Nothing has ever calmed Vakroth. Nothing." Lisa activated the communication system. "Jake, can you hear me? What's happening out there?" Jake's voice came back, tired but calm. Vakroth is sleeping, Captain. I think it's safe now. I think it just needed someone to show it kindness. Sleeping? Lisa could not believe what she was hearing. The dragon is sleeping? Yes, ma'am. And I need to stay here. If I leave now, if Vakroth wakes up and I'm gone, it might panic. It might start attacking again. Pete looked at the captain. He's right. We can't risk moving him. Lisa sat back in her chair, her mind racing. They had come out here to explore, to make first contact with alien species. She had never imagined their first real contact would be with the galaxy's most feared creature, or that her youngest crew member would somehow tame it with nothing but compassion. "All right, Jake," Lisa said. "You stay there. We're going to call the Galactic Council. They need to know about this right away." "Thank you, Captain," Jake said. In the silence of space, Jake floated with his arms around the sleeping dragon. Vakroth's tail held him gently, and he could feel the steady rhythm of the creature's breathing. He was exhausted, and his body ached from being in the suit so long. But he could not let go. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "You're not alone anymore," Jake whispered to Vakroth. "I promise you're not alone." 4 days passed, and Jake stayed with Vakroth the entire time. He floated in space beside the sleeping dragon, his hand always touching those warm scales. The Meridian crew sent out supplies every few hours: food packets, water, fresh oxygen tanks, and battery packs for his suit. Amy piloted the supply pod herself each time, moving slowly and quietly. "You look terrible," Amy said through the radio during one supply run. Her voice was full of worry. "I'm okay," Jake said, though his eyes had dark circles under them and his voice was tired. "I can sleep a little while Vakroth is resting. If I take my hand away, it stirs. I think it knows when I'm here." "The council ships arrived an hour ago," Amy told him. "There are 12 of them. Big military vessels. They're keeping their distance, though." Jake looked past Amy's pod and saw the ships floating far away, their lights blinking in the darkness. "Are they going to try to hurt Vakroth?" "I don't think so. They seem more confused than anything else. No one can believe what you did." After Amy left, Jake pressed his helmet against Vakroth's scales again. "You hear that? More people are here. But don't worry. I won't let anyone hurt you." The dragon made a soft, rumbling sound in its sleep, and the tail squeezed Jake just a little tighter. The Galactic Council sent a message to Captain Hayes. The voice belonged to Admiral Jen, a Korthari commander. "Captain Hayes, we need to understand what happened here. We are sending scientific teams to study the situation. Please tell your crew member to remain with Vakroth. If the creature wakes and finds him gone, the results could be catastrophic." "Understood, Admiral," Lisa replied. Jake has already decided to stay. Over the next several hours, shuttles began arriving from the Council fleet. They carried scientists from different species, all wearing protective suits and carrying equipment. They moved carefully through space, scanning Vakroth from every angle. They were quiet and respectful, like people visiting a sleeping giant. Dr. Kelvin Shaw was leading the research team from Earth. He was 60 years old with gray hair and a kind face. He had been traveling with the Council fleet as a human representative. When he approached Jake, his voice was gentle. "Hello, Jake. I'm Dr. Shaw. I've been studying xenobiology for 30 years, and I have never seen anything like this. Can you tell me what happened?" Jake explained everything. The fear he felt, the tears in Vakroth's eyes, the scars covering its body. The way it responded when he touched it. The kiss that changed everything. Dr. Shaw listened carefully, recording everything on his tablet. "And you felt a vibration?" "Yes, like a sound too deep to hear. It felt lonely and hopeful at the same time." "Fascinating." Dr. Shaw moved closer to Vakroth, studying the dragon's sleeping face. "These scars are very old. Some of them might be hundreds of years old. A Therian scientist joined them, her antenna twitching with excitement. Look at these scale patterns. I recognize them from ancient records. The Dravex had scales exactly like this. The Dravex? Dr. Shaw pulled up files on his tablet. But they went extinct 300 years ago. Apparently one survived, the Therian said quietly. More scientists gathered around, comparing images and data. Jake watched them work while keeping his hand on Vakroth. He did not understand all their technical words, but he understood the sadness in their voices. Dr. Shaw finally looked at Jake with tears in his eyes. The Dravex were one of the most social species ever discovered. They lived in huge family groups, sometimes hundreds together. They communicated through touch and emotional connection. Physical contact was as necessary to them as breathing. So when Vakroth's species died, Jake said slowly, it was left completely alone. Yes, and for a Dravex, that would be torture. Imagine losing everyone you ever loved all at once, and then living with that pain for 300 years. It would drive anyone insane. Jake looked at the sleeping dragon with new understanding. It wasn't attacking people because it was evil. It was attacking because it was in unbearable pain. Exactly, Dr. Shaw said. It was lashing out, trying to make the universe hurt as much as it hurt. A tall Velen scientist named Dr. Sarna was studying the readings from Jake's suit. I'm seeing something interesting here. Human bioelectric patterns are remarkably similar to Dravex patterns, and the pheromones humans produce when showing affection are almost identical to Dravex bonding pheromones. What does that mean? Jake asked. Dr. Shaw looked amazed. It means when you touched Vakroth with genuine compassion, when you kissed it, the creature felt what it had been missing for 3 centuries. For the first time since its entire species died, it felt the sensation of family, of love, of not being alone. Jake felt his throat tighten. He looked at Vakroth, at all the scars and broken scales, and understood. This dragon had been destroying worlds not because it enjoyed violence, but because it was drowning in grief and had no other way to express it. Can it heal? Jake asked quietly. Can Vakroth ever be okay again? Dr. Shaw sighed. I don't know. The psychological damage is severe, but you've given it something it hasn't had in 300 years. You've given it hope. As if it knew people were talking about it, Vakroth stirred. The dragon's eyes opened just a crack. Those burning orbs looked directly at Jake, checking to make sure he was still there. Then they closed again, and Jake felt the tail pull him a little closer. It's checking on you, Dr. Sarna said with wonder, making sure you haven't left. I told Vakroth I wouldn't leave, Jake said, and I meant it. The scientists continued their work, discovering more about the Dravex with each passing hour. They learned that Dravex bonded for life with their family groups. They learned that Dravex young were raised by the entire community, not just their parents. They learned that without touch and emotional connection, a Dravex would slowly lose its mind. Captain Hayes came out in a shuttle to check on Jake. She floated nearby, looking worried. Jake, you've been out here for 4 days. You need real rest. I can't leave yet, Captain. The Council wants to move Vakroth to a station where it can be studied properly. No, Jake said firmly. If you move it, Vakroth will wake up scared. Let it rest here, please. Lisa looked at the sleeping dragon, then at Jake's determined face. The Council has a proposal. They want to build a station specifically for Vakroth. They want you to stay with it permanently, help it heal. They'll give you a team, supplies, whatever you need. Jake looked at Vakroth. The dragon was breathing slowly and peacefully, the first real rest it had probably had in centuries. I'll do it, whatever Vakroth needs. This will change your entire life, Lisa warned. You'll be giving up everything you planned. My plan was to explore and help living things, Jake said. "This is the most important living thing I'll ever help." "I'm sure, Captain." Lisa smiled sadly. "Your parents will be proud, scared, but proud." That night, as Jake floated with the sleeping dragon, he thought about Earth and his family. They seemed so far away now, but he had made his choice. Vakroth needed him, and he would not abandon this suffering creature. "You're going to be okay," Jake whispered. "I promise. You're never going to be alone again." 6 weeks had passed since Jake first touched Vakroth. The Galactic Council had worked quickly, building a station in the empty space where the dragons slept. The station was not large, just big enough for a small crew and supplies. It floated near Vakroth like a tiny moon orbiting a planet. Jake finally moved inside the station, though he still spent most of his time outside with Vakroth. The dragon had woken up 3 times during the construction, and each time it had looked for Jake immediately. When it saw him, Vakroth would make that deep rumbling sound and curl closer. Then it would sleep again, peaceful and calm. Amy had volunteered to stay with Jake. "You'll need someone to help," she had said, "and I'm not leaving my best friend alone out here." Dr. Shaw stayed too, along with 2 other scientists. They were there to study Vakroth, but also to help Jake understand the dragon better. The station became their new home. On the morning of the 7th week, something amazing happened. Jake was outside as usual, floating near Vakroth's head with his hand on the dragon's snout. Vakroth's eyes opened, and this time they stayed open. The dragon looked at Jake with full awareness, not the half-asleep checking it had done before. "Good morning," Jake said softly. Vakroth stared at him for a long moment. Then Jake felt something in his mind. Not words exactly, but feelings and images. He saw colors he had no names for. He felt emotions that were both familiar and strange. Sadness, loneliness, and then, surprisingly, gratitude. Jake gasped. "You're talking to me! You're actually talking to me!" More images came. Jake saw other creatures like Vakroth, dozens of them, flying through space together. He felt the warmth of being surrounded by family. Then the images turned dark. He saw the Dravex dying, one by one, falling still in the void. He felt Vakroth's grief, so deep and terrible that it made Jake want to cry. And then he felt 300 years of loneliness, of pain so intense that it had turned into rage. "I understand," Jake whispered, tears floating away from his eyes inside his helmet. "I understand now. I'm so sorry that happened to you." Vakroth made a new sound, softer than before. The dragon's huge head moved closer, pressing gently against Jake. It was a gesture of affection, of thanks. Inside the station, Dr. Shaw was watching the readings on his screen. "Everyone, come look at this. Vakroth is communicating with Jake. Real communication, not just physical comfort." Amy rushed to the window. She could see Jake and Vakroth pressed together, and even from this distance she could tell something important was happening. Over the following days, Jake and Vakroth developed a way to communicate. The dragon would send images and feelings, and Jake would respond with words and touch. It was slow and sometimes confusing, but it worked. Vakroth began to share memories of its species, showing Jake what the Dravex had been like before the plague. They had been peaceful, Vakroth showed him. The Dravex had traveled between stars, but not to conquer. They went to learn and explore and make friends. They had loved music and art and the beauty of the universe. When the plague came, it had killed them quickly. Vakroth had survived only because it had been far away from the others when the sickness spread. "You've been grieving all this time," Jake said. "Grieving and alone and angry at the universe for taking everything from you." Vakroth sent a feeling of confirmation. Yes, the dragon had been so lost in pain that destroying things became the only way to feel anything at all. "But you don't have to do that anymore," Jake said. You're not alone now." Word of what was happening spread quickly through the galaxy. Ships began to pass by the station, curious to see the legendary Vakroth sleeping peacefully instead of attacking. Some captains were nervous at first, but when they saw the dragon simply watching them with calm eyes, they relaxed. One day, a merchant ship had engine trouble near the station. Instead of fleeing in terror, the captain sent a distress call. Jake asked Vakroth if they could help, and the dragon agreed. Vakroth flew over to the damaged ship, moving with grace and control. The dragon used one claw very carefully to hold the ship steady while the crew made repairs. When they finished, the captain sent a message of thanks. Vakroth responded with that deep, musical sound that meant contentment. "You're protecting them," Jake said with a smile, "just like your species used to do." More incidents like this happened over the next months. A colony sent a call for help when meteors threatened their settlement. Vakroth flew there and used its massive wings to shield the colony until the meteor shower passed. A lost exploration vessel needed directions. Vakroth guided them safely to the nearest station. Slowly, the galaxy's most feared creature was becoming its guardian. The Galactic Council held a special meeting to discuss Vakroth's new role. They decided officially that Vakroth and Jake would be designated as protectors of the outer systems. Ships traveling through dangerous areas could call for their help. In return, the Council would support the station and make sure Jake and his team had everything they needed. Captain Hayes visited the station 6 months after everything began. She found Jake floating outside with Vakroth as usual, but now other humans were there too, volunteers who had come to help. It turned out that many humans could communicate with Vakroth through touch and emotion, though not as well as Jake. "You've done something incredible," Lisa told Jake. "You took the galaxy's greatest threat and turned it into its greatest protector, all because you showed kindness when everyone else showed fear." Jake looked at Vakroth, who was playing gently with one of the other humans, letting them ride on its back in slow circles around the station. "I just did what felt right." Vakroth needed someone to care. "The Council is calling you the Dragon Tamer," Lisa said. Jake laughed. "I didn't tame anything. I just made a friend." That evening, Jake and Vakroth floated together away from the station, looking at the stars. Jake could feel the dragon's contentment through their connection. Vakroth was healing slowly, the terrible grief becoming something softer. The anger was gone, replaced by purpose and companionship. "You know what's funny?" Jake said. "Humanity spent so long being afraid of what was out here in space. We thought we'd find enemies and dangers, and we did find the most dangerous thing in the galaxy, but all it needed was love." Vakroth sent an image of agreement. The dragon wrapped its tail gently around Jake, protective and affectionate. In the distance, Earth's sun was visible, just a tiny point of light. Jake thought about his home and his family. He missed them, but he knew he was exactly where he needed to be. "Come on," Jake said. "Let's go back. Amy's making dinner and she'll be mad if we're late." Vakroth rumbled with what Jake had learned was the dragon's version of laughter. Together they flew back toward the station, the ancient Dravex and the young human who had saved each other. The galaxy watched and learned that sometimes the strongest weapon was not power or violence. Sometimes it was just compassion, freely given to someone who needed it most. And high above it all, Vakroth kept watch over the stars, no longer a terror but a guardian, never alone again. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Sonnet 4.5.